Hi, I'm Dr. Gerry Fishkin.
And I'm Julianne Good.
And welcome to PSYCHED. We are thrilled to be here today again and welcome you to our 5th episode of PSYCHED. This morning I want to talk a little bit about Patreon. We know many of you now are looking at us. We have almost 2,000 viewers, and this is our 5th show. We're thrilled that you are enjoying what we're presenting to you, and we hope that this is meaningful and valuable in your own personal and family life. As important, in order to keep our show moving forward in the direction that we're at, where we are registered with Patreon. Patreon is a form of crowdfunding. Many of you may know a bit about crowdfunding, but it is that way that we can stay viable and valuable to you while increasing our production values.
Please visit Patreon and contribute, and you'll get wonderful swag from us like coffee cups.
Well, take a look. We've got our beautiful Good Fish productions. Good Fish, of course, for Julianne Good and Fish for Gerry Fishkin. You'll get one of these beautiful Patreon mugs.
They're awesome.
And they are. They're like
sturdy.
Really sturdy. Watch me throw it on the ground. No, never mind. But anyway, we have that, and we have some other offers and benefits for you. So we encourage you to take a look at that and contribute whatever you can afford. We would really appreciate that. Julianne.
So thank you for contributing anything that you can, and we look forward to having contact with you. Thank you very much.
Addiction is the greatest public health crisis of our time and the #1 killer of young people in America today. At Beginnings Treatment Centers, we offer safe, modern, effective treatment for substance abuse and addiction. Minutes from the beach in beautiful Orange County, California, Beginnings offers comfortable surroundings, private chefs, and a dedicated clinical staff. Beginnings makes recovery possible for you and for your loved ones. Don't wait until it's too late. Call 800-387-6907 right now for a free confidential assessment.
Hi, Julianne.
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
So we're going to talk about boundaries today and how important it is in our everyday lives. Because
You're too close to me, Julianne. You're too close. 17 inches. Boundaries.
We have to have healthy boundaries between us because that's important. Otherwise, we're either too rigid, or we're too porous, or we're too permeable,
or too angry.
And we need to keep this so that we can protect ourselves, but yet we can interact with others.
And as we get into this, we're going to be talking more about what does it mean to protect ourselves, even to have a self, and the importance that boundaries plays in the establishment of ourself. That is who we are.
Exactly.
Very important.
It is.
Are we ready?
All right, we are.
All right.
So this is Boundaries on What's Trending.
What's trending? What's trending? What's trending?
We define personal boundaries as the emotional, mental, and physical limits we establish to help protect ourselves from being used, manipulated, or violated by others. Boundaries allow us to separate who we are, what we think, believe, and feel from the thoughts and feelings of others. We create these boundaries to help identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for others to behave toward us and how we will respond when someone violates those limits or personal boundaries. Most important, boundaries identify and define our sense of self, just as we talked about earlier. Just as countries are defined by their borders, boundaries allow us to know who we are as well as what our personal limits are. So setting personal boundaries takes courage, practice, and most important. So why is it important to set personal boundaries? Well, number one, setting personal boundaries is essential if we want to be emotionally and physically healthy. Number two, creating and setting personal boundaries is empowering. Through the setting and maintaining of our emotional, mental, and physical boundaries, we protect our self-esteem, maintain our self-respect, and enjoy positive relationships with others. Number three, We can have an equal partnership with others where responsibility and power are equally shared. You know, in unhealthy relationships, there's always an imbalance of power, and somebody always feels less than or beaten up or overtaken by another. So, number 4, by setting healthy boundaries, we separate our needs, thoughts, feelings, and desires from others. Number 5, boundaries allow us to be assertive, confident, and provide us the ability to say yes or no without feeling guilt or fear of rejection or abandonment. In other words, you have a right to have a right. And most people don't believe that or understand that. We do have a right to have a right. That's a God-given essential for all of us. Number 6, not setting and maintaining healthy boundaries causes emotional pain, humiliation, and loss of self-respect. And this can lead to depression, codependency, anxiety, and even stress-induced physical illnesses, including panic attacks and shame-based behaviors such as addictions and other forms of acting out. So we really have to be careful in setting our boundaries to avoid these negative consequences.
Boundaries fall within 7 categories: emotional, intellectual, mental, physical, material, sexual, and spiritual boundaries. Emotional and intellectual boundaries protect our sense of self-esteem and our ability to separate our feelings from others. These boundaries help us separate and protect our emotions and responsibility from someone else's emotions or negative feelings or problems. With healthy emotional and intellectual boundaries, we learn that we are only responsible for our own feelings and do not personalize or feel responsible for someone else's feelings. Mental boundaries protect your thoughts, values, beliefs, attitudes, and opinions. With healthy mental boundaries, you know what you believe, and you can value the belief system of others without defensiveness and maintaining an open mind. Physical boundaries relate to our personal and physical space, including your body as well as your privacy. Sometimes when people get too close to us, say 17 inches or less, we often feel closed in on. This is what a violation of our personal space feels like. And there's also a cultural component to this, because sometimes some cultures it is okay to get a little bit closer to other people. And in American culture, most of the times it's an arm's length, right? Material boundaries have to do with our personal possessions and what we do with them, including giving or lending our things such as our car, money, or clothes. Even with our closest family member or friend, we learn to say no when no is in our best interest without feeling guilty. Sexual boundaries are the limits we set with someone who desires to engage with us intimately. These boundaries put us in control assertively without undue individual or social pressure, intimidation, or shame. It's okay to say no when you don't really want to be having sex with somebody, right? Spiritual boundaries are based upon your belief in God or whatever you deem to be your higher power. This is a very personal This is a very personal boundary that most people hold very dear.
Personal boundary dysfunction. Well, what is personal boundary dysfunction? Current research has shown that what we might call personal boundary dysfunction most often develops early in life within a dysfunctional family environment. We most often find that within the dysfunctional family, the child's needs and feelings are often subordinated or subjugated to the needs, wants, and feelings of the parents. Within this structure, the child learns that he or she doesn't matter. They may not feel good enough and learn that their needs really don't matter. In other words, in the old days, children should be seen and not heard. How awful is that? If verbal or physical abuse is present, the child learns to be fearful of authority or with those seen as more powerful. Now, we often see this pattern in children who have been bullied and are threatened by setting and maintaining their own boundaries. And bullying has become a very important part of the social narrative today. These individuals frequently fear rejection and abandonment. They are fearful of confrontation, they lack self-assertion, and suffer from very low self-esteem. And they never feel good enough. And I wonder how many of you out there just don't feel good enough and can identify with what we're talking about here. On the other hand, when parents don't display effective boundary setting and act as codependents to a demanding child, the child never learns healthy personal boundaries. And as adults, these folks often expect of others the same exalted and unrealistic attention their parents gave them. They have the same lack of boundary setting as their parents. These adults also have a very low threshold for frustration and are frequently angry or aggressive. And this behavior is the opposite of self-assertion and healthy social behavior. And we often find that this carries into their interpersonal relationships as adults, often leading to broken marriages, broken relationships, and a lot of despair. Frequently, and especially within the therapeutic process, we observe that there are those types of individuals who especially need healthy boundary setting. Frequently, and especially within the therapeutic process, we observe that there are those types of individuals who especially need healthy boundary setting. As we've seen from the dysfunctional family process I talked about earlier, there are those who have been raised to believe that their needs don't matter and clearly allow other people to take advantage of them.
That's horrible.
I know. These individuals treat themselves and allow others to treat them in self-effacing ways. These doormats never feel good about themselves and have a very poor sense of self. They are defined by their lack of boundaries. When parents overindulge their children, overprotecting and falsely empowering them, these children develop an inflated sense of self-esteem and entitlement. We often see these enabler codependents in toxic relationships and frequently in relationships with addicts and other highly dependent individuals.
And we work with a lot of these types.
All day long,
Yes.
Julianne, all day long. Lastly, we find some individuals who avoid conflict and have no sense of their own identity, including what they need, think, want, or especially feel. These individuals typically have no sense of self and typically fear self-discovery. Their primary focus is pleasing others. They tolerate significant disrespect and abuse from others, and they lack self-assertion because their own sense of self is unknown.
Strangers to themselves.
They are alienated and estranged from who they are, from their very core.
Yes.
Other complicating factors, often related to the lack of effective boundary setting, are associated with individuals suffering from addictions, mental illness, including borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, as well as individuals who are totally codependent. Ultimately, as we've seen, not having effective boundaries only leads to humiliation and shame, and can lead to shame-based behaviors including alcoholism and drug addictions. Often, toxic relationships follow these patterns. Frequently, because of the unequal power distribution in toxic relationships, boundaryless individuals never assert themselves, further adding to the loss of self-esteem, self-knowledge, and self-respect. Most important, self-respect.
It is most important.
Oh, I think so, Julianne.
It's hard to get up in the morning without having self-respect.
Can't look in the mirror. Can't look in the mirror,
it.
dear.
Yep.
Right.
Yes. So how do you develop healthy boundaries? There are very effective ways to build and preserve healthy boundaries. Primary is the need to be assertive, which may be seen as a most important
Absolutely.
factor associated with healthy boundary setting.
Yeah.
When we assert ourselves, we tell the world and ourselves who we are and what our needs and wants are in proactive and socially respectable ways. Self-assertion takes time and patience, as well as support from others, and the significant amount of support is crucial. Support can come from family, friends, religious groups, and those with whom we feel safe to share ourselves.
Absolutely.
Understand what your limits are, including your physical boundaries and emotional, mental, and spiritual limits. This requires us to practice self-awareness, as it is only through self-knowledge that we can set effective boundaries shaped to our own needs, wants, and desires. By being direct with others, we leave no doubt as to who we are.
Right.
Being direct does not mean being aggressive, which is always viewed as negative or hostile. Being direct is another form of self-assertion. When we are direct with others, we often find that our interpersonal relationships improve significantly, leaving no room for others to make faulty assumptions about who we are and what we want and don't want. One of the most difficult words to say in any language is also the smallest. The word is no. It takes courage, intention, and practice.
Sure does.
Start small and give yourself time and have patience with yourself. That's really important, is to have patience with yourself. Everybody wants everything now.
Right now or yesterday.
And it takes time to change.
It certainly does,
It really
Julianne.
does.
It does.
Yes.
It does. The knowledge that you have the right to have a right can free you from self-doubts and shame. By accepting the fact that we are all on an equal footing with others, this allows us to negate the feeling of being less than. Now, along these lines, we must understand that no one else's needs, wants, values, emotions, or power are more important than our own. Each of us are perfectly imperfect, and no one is better than anyone else. And if we can accept that perfectly imperfect expectation, we don't have to desire to be perfect because we can't. So in order to set healthy boundaries, we must assess our present in order to effectively know what our needs are and what our wants are. So in that regard, stepping back from ourselves and looking at our life objectively, if we can, as if watching a movie, can help us gain a perspective as to where and how we've been. And this can benefit us in terms of our relationships with others and our role in them.
And it's also including us, we are the stars in our own lives.
We're
in
the
our
stars
own
of our own movie.
That's right.
So this is sometimes difficult to accomplish, and in the short run can lead to some pain as we review our life.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people have shame and guilt about that, but we're living in the present and then in the now. And without this knowledge, we cannot grow and be the person we want to be and effectively show the world who we are and what we want. We must make ourselves a priority, not in the clinical or narcissistic sense, but rather showing ourselves in the world who we are without conflict, anger, or despair.
And total honesty with ourselves and with others.
We have to be honest with ourselves. And there's one other factor here, Julianne, that I want our viewers to know, and that is within this therapeutic process, as we're making change, other people may cause us to have resistance, or they may resist our own personal change. And that's because people are used to seeing us in a certain way. And when we begin the process of self-assertion, setting our boundaries and our limits, we reestablish our relationships with others and create a different kind of a power situation where we're on an equal footing, as I said earlier. Now, people want to resist that. They don't want to change because they want to continue to look at us as we've been before. But that's not acceptable. It can't be acceptable as we are trying to establish our identity, our healthy identity, with our needs, values, wants, and our sense of self. It's critically important.
It is.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you continue to work on yourself in a proactive and positive way. Self-assertion takes time, energy, and support. And we have to understand that in order to be effective in our in our interpersonal life and also have that positive self-reflection, we must assert ourself. And assertion is oftentimes seen as a negative or aggressive behavior, and it's not that at all, folks. What it means is you're telling the world who you are, you're standing firm, and in the reflection of that, in that momentary reflection, you will feel a sense of empowerment, maybe one you've never felt before. And even as I'm talking to you now, I feel that. I feel it within me because I know what it's like not to have that sense of empowerment. I know what it's like not to have boundaries. I came from a boundaryless family, and I understand that the pain and the shame and the guilt and all of that it takes to live that way is a lot of extra work, unnecessary work. Look around you. Everyone you see shares a deep and terrible secret that no one ever talks about. It is, in fact, one of the best kept secrets of all time, as universal and natural as the air we breathe, and just as pervasive. No one is immune to it. Look inside yourself. We listen to it instinctively, hold it closely, impetuously, and follow it without question every moment of our lives. The secret is our inner voice, the self-talk, the primal and silent internal communication that form alongside our psyche, feeding us constant messages that control our behavior. We hear it, but we can never see or feel or detect it in any other way. If you'd like to learn more about the relationship of early life abuse, trauma, neglect, violence, and its relationship to addiction, please pick up a copy of my new book, The Science of Shame and Its Treatment, available at the bookstore or online. Thank you very much. And don't forget to follow us on Patreon. On Patreon, you're going to find some very interesting and informative information that will further give you some background on our show. On our Patreon, we have B-roll stuff that is kind of fun, and we encourage you to join us, to be part of the Psyched family. And we also want your feedback. So we encourage you to contact us at therapycable.com/psyched for your inputs, your observations, and most important, your feedback if we're meeting your needs.
Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Psyched. We'd like to shout out special thanks to therapycable.com, Beginnings Treatment Centers, and Parker's Brothers Publications. So join us for our next episode of Psyched, and we look forward to having you be with us.